So, yeah. So if you can sit down, we are ready to start our workshop number 4. So thank you very much for volunteering to participate to this workshop. I hope it's going to be a very interesting discussion. You, of course, are all invited to contribute and participate. Our very active rapporteurs will take note and report to the plenary of the discussion we are going to have. Let me, first of all, thank the Secretary of State, Mr. Giacomelli, for being with us. He represents the Italian presidency. He will be chairing the Telecom Council in the next 6 months. So we thank you very much for being here. Let me also thank the Secretary of State, Mr. Calvo Sotelo, to be here. Thank you very much. And you all. And let me also thank the organizers for having organized such in such a beautiful venue and in such a well-organized way the possibility for us to discuss about the digital economy. Now, I particularly like the title, which is The Life in the Single Market, because life puts citizens at the center, so the idea of life puts citizens at the center of the single market. And that's really the perspective that I will ask the various speakers to expand on, and also you if you like to comment. So what it means to be in the single market. What are the opportunities in terms of life opportunities? This morning we heard it's a digital revolution, it's an industrial revolution, so things are going to change. So the way we work is going to change, the work opportunity for us, for our children are going to change, and also the possibilities are going to increase. And this is the perspective that we want to expand this afternoon. So a much more connected, open to different ideas environment in which ideas, goods and services can be exchanged, and hopefully we can enjoy a better quality of experience. I use intentionally the word quality of experience because the idea in the single market, the digital single market, is to enhance the experience in terms of life experience, interaction, the possibility to bring forward your ideas in terms of new ideas, how to develop yourself. So in the single market, you can be an artist, you can be a creator, you can be someone that contributes actively to politics at the local and the national level. So the possibility to be heard, the possibility to choose the best services, the best quality, it is really a possibility that the single market brings to you. Of course, in such an environment, we like to have a number of things which are in the right place. For instance, I mean that there are opportunities for all of us to develop our own professional future, that there are opportunities to develop our own personality, but with the respect of the private life. So in this respect, of course, security is an issue, privacy is an issue, and in general, the respect of individual rights is an issue. So all of this, I hope we can debate from different angles, and we really we have to thank you and all the speakers for contributing to this debate. Secretary of State Giacomelli asked to conclude, which we are very happy about this. So we'll change a little bit the speaking order. So the first speaker will be Arti Ola. Where is Arti? Oh, yeah. So Arti has an exceptional experience when it comes to looking to something that is the single market, is the satellite industry. So, I mean, satellite by nature, they cross borders, and they are at the center of the media revolution. Just look what is happening in the United States in terms of, merger of traditional telecom companies with satellite companies. So, Arti, can you enlighten us about the life in the single market?
Thank you, Roberto, and I'm delighted to be here and also to speak on behalf of the satellite sector in this exclusive panel today. I think, as you said,
You have to put the mic on.
Okay, is that better? Great, okay. I just said thank you, and I'm very happy to be here. Moving on. as Roberto said, the nature of satellite technology and satellite operators is essentially already single market or even global market. The market for satellite operators is a global one. But in terms of Europe, I think this is a sector that has already benefited from the European single market as it stands today in two very important ways. The first one concerns broadcasting and the 1989 Television Without Frontiers Directive. By allowing the free reception of TV signals in every member state, the European Union really laid the foundation stone for the ultimate success of satellite broadcasting as we know it today. The second example is more recent, and it's something which Roberto himself played an instrumental role in, and that's to do with broadband and the Digital Agenda 2013 target of 100% broadband coverage. By working with the Commission, we established a tool, broadbandforall.eu, which allows remote and rural users in every member state of the Union to find their local satellite broadband distributor, and so come online within a matter of weeks. But generally, when we go to conferences and discussions today about single telecoms market, we hear a lot about the need to improve the competitiveness of European companies in a time when non-European companies really dominate the global market. And what you said in your opening, Roberto, really resonated with me. I wondered if you'd seen my talking points, because I think that if we want to maintain European competitiveness, economic growth, and employment, the key really is to put the citizen and his user experience at the heart of policy making. So what services is it that users want today, and how are we going to deliver them to them? And in Europe, we still have two kinds of users. We still have 6 million households who are unconnected, and those people, they just want to be online. They just want to get connected. And then you have the rest who have the luxury of being able to demand multi-screen, interactive access, interactive connectivity anytime, anywhere, and on any device. And that class of user doesn't just want to be online. He really wants the whole converged broadband broadcast experience. So that's really a different ballgame. Of course, broadband is the story of the age, and in the last 5 years, this Commission has made tremendous progress. But I think looking forward, the answer is not binary. I think it's not just about broadband infrastructure, and I think the challenge for both industry players and policymakers is now to think out of the box. The user who wants on-demand video, he doesn't care how he gets it. As long as it's convenient, he can just click a button and he gets it. It's very important at a price that he's willing to pay, and it's in great quality and offers him maximum choice. And in that context, I'd like to spend a moment to talk about next generation video, and what I mean by that is ultra high definition. You've all heard of high definition. Now we're in the era where ultra high definition, or so-called 4K, is emerging. We all know whenever there's a new phone, a tablet, a device, or a TV, people flock to buy these things. And the content to make sure that we can actually use them is emerging too. Already last year, Amazon committed to filming all of its original full series for 2014 in 4K. Back in February, Netflix launched House of Cards Series 2 in 4K. So we're not talking about the future, we're talking about something which is already happening. And in the satellite world, just last week, I don't know if some of you know, but the France-Germany FIFA World Cup was broadcast for the first time, commercial transmissions in 4K. So this is really, it's amazing digital progress, and it's all about the user experience. So, of course, when you talk about progress, you also have to address the challenges, and those in this case are pretty amazing too. So I was at an event in Brussels recently where a senior executive from Telia-Sonera, he asked a really brilliant question, which I think framed the problem very well. He said, how do we know that 5 years from now we will still be able to offer everyday e-services, and that they won't be crowded out by all of the video that's going to congest these pipes? And I think he really hit the nail on the head there. It's not only a pertinent question, it's in line with the Cisco predictions of how much video is going to dominate internet traffic going forward. So I think when we look at increasing high definition content, whether that's linear, so TV, or non-linear, that increasing, the penetration of it increasing, and now also the emergence of what I've called next generation video. I think that really highlights the need to find new, innovative, sustainable commercial solutions that allow for different technologies to integrate and be played to their strengths. Obviously, satellite it's the hands-down winner when it comes to broadcasting, and that's a technology that can be integrated with other terrestrial solutions in order to deliver the kind of sophisticated, high-performing networks that are going to be needed going forward. And for me, that's what the digital single market should really be about. So not just overcoming national boundaries, but also overcoming sectoral boundaries. So an environment where technologies operate alone, provide services alone, and really to see a paradigm shift towards hybrid solutions to deliver, to generate a lot more value going forward. I think no technology can do it alone, and if policymakers pick winners, then I think that's going to have a negative effect. I think it will stifle innovation, it will drive prices up, that will directly affect European competitiveness. It will enhance the digital divide and simply not deliver on what consumers want today. So to say what you said, Andrea, last week, you said the solution is a lasagna of technologies, from fiber, cable, cellular, and all the way to satellite, and probably hybrid solutions that we don't actually see today, but that are surely going to emerge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arti, and thank you for quoting the lasagnas. Our next speaker is coming from the Italian audiovisual and telecom regulator, but is also a professor in economics. So I'm sure he will go outside this straitjacket of regulator and will introduce to you his ideas about demand and offer in the digital single market. So I'm very pleased to give the floor to Professor Antonio Nicita. Antonio, floor is yours.
Thank you. While I'm waiting for some slides, if there are, just starting on this idea of digital life and digital single market, because indeed it's a very challenging title on the one side, because it's not only talking about the digital single market, which is something we are used to discuss, both from an economic way and from a regulatory point of view, but also because looking at life, so at the digital life, we are in a sense trespassing the traditional boundaries of demand and supply, which are the typical, and market, which are the typical notion that economists use when they have to tackle some problem. So digital life actually means something which has to do to everyday life, so to needs that cover all our activities on the one side as consumers and on the other as citizens. And so from this point of view, the challenge is very big, especially for a country like Italy, which stands behind the average of all economic indicators defining the average of broadband connection and services in Europe. Is very important because we have to define what these needs are and how can we be able to supply the proper services. Now, from a general point of view, we are all aware of the fact that consumers are still demanding, are increasingly demanding quality of services, especially quality of services in mobility, which is the new challenge given by smartphone and all the kind of new devices we actually use in our everyday life. But the real question is not only this quality of capacity that is needed, but also the scope, the variety of contents and of the possible services we can approach in the future. We are actually shifting every day from the notion of one-to-one services to one-to-many services and to many services. And actually, one of the big challenge we have in front of us is the one given by the so-called Internet of Things and to machine-to-machine connections. Because actually we are transforming what normally were connections among people to connections among data, to connection between different sources of information. So we are actually transforming us in a sort of digital life, in the sense that everything that is the digital is somehow transformed into data, big data. And this is something that is challenging both the market, I mean private provisioning of services, but also the public services, the public administration, the way in which we actually manage and frame the activity among citizens. And actually, while we are just trying to move in Europe towards a system in which we are actually opening public administration, we are actually opening access to data, we are trying to make different sectors communicating each other. On the other side, on the private provision of services, we observe something different. And I think that in the future, this is the main challenge we have in front of us, because as citizens, we are somehow forced to improve the quality of the services of public administration, to have access to data, to open our data, and to try to communicate each other our needs. But on the private side of the story, we built data through our freedom of speech, freedom of behavior through internet, but the final outcome of this data is not public, in the public domain. It's something that belongs to someone else, that is using this for business purposes. Such a sort of asymmetry, which is in our future, is something we have to challenge somehow, because from this ability to have access, exclusive or not, to data overall, it will depend the evolution on the future market. It will depend the ability of having vertically integrated operators. It will depend also, I mean, our ability as citizens and consumers and producer to challenge the new form of organization in the market. Let me just recall in this respect three main challenges that I think we have in the future that normally do not belong to the standard debate on investments, broadband, and so on and so forth. But these are challenges that I think Europe should properly take into account. The first one is interoperability of the new software connections, and I'm talking about the world of app, for instance. The evolution we're actually observing is a sort of fight towards the standards between iOS, Android, and so on and so forth. But the real question is how this evolution of different standards is affecting the world that is below, the world of smartphone, the world of connection, the mobility of consumers among providers. This is something very important because, as you know, if we just go on the ladder of the markets and we go on the content, on the provider of OTT and other contents, we have a world in which national regulation, European regulation is very difficult for tackling problems because we have worldwide boundaries of geographical markets. We have a situation in which probably the powers of national regulators are actually very limited in tackling this problem. But on the other side, what you see is the evolution of a world that is on the upper side of the exchange of businesses that is very difficult to regulate and also to manage in the proper way. For instance, to understand whether or not some new dominant position possibly emerging in the world of software might be challenged somehow. This is very important for the future because we can favor a situation in which interoperability is enhanced, for instance, at the European level, through building software that are interoperable somehow. So in order to allow also independent producers of app or of new software to be in the market, to challenge new and old opposition, and so somehow to take into account all the opportunities coming from the digital life and the digital world. This is particularly important in the field of education, in the field of e-health, in all the fields in which we have so far some application which are not yet held to the market, but that belongs to the universities, belongs to public bodies, and somehow they are not able to be actually diffused in a larger scale precisely because there is a problem of interoperability. A second problem, I don't want to open this black box, is the question of net neutrality, but just in the sense of knowing that while the quality of services is tremendously important, especially, and I want to stress that the quality of services for services that are provided in mobility feature, okay? So while this is extremely important, but on the other, we need to take into account an approach that is not just looking at net neutrality as a sort of rigid rule that we have to apply now, but much more as a sort of perspective that we want to reach always. So even, for instance, through a sort of, let me define this ladder of quality, in the sense that of continuously to increase the minimum quality of services we want to provide to our citizens. Another point, and I'm going to conclude, that I want to stress is harmonization. Harmonization not only of rules, of course, because we already have harmonization of rules within Europe, but harmonization of the way in which we are able to use economic resources, and particularly I'm referred to spectrum policies. Actually, the way in which we have harmonized, and also I have to say Roberto Viola has done a wonderful job, not because he's here, but because it is well known that he has played a very important role in Europe on this respect at the Radio Spectrum Policy Group. We need to harmonize our spectrum policies because we need to provide to manufacturers and then to consumers larger scale markets so that it's possible within the same device to have markets that are larger, that are not just confined to regional area, but that can be used elsewhere so that it's possible to reduce the cost for consumers in this respect. And I also think that we need at European level to insist in having some sharing rules of frequencies and spectrum, both licensed and unlicensed, because I think this is possible that through this sharing rule, it will be possible to have a wider access to spectrum policies also for new businesses, not only for traditional businesses, but also for new business that are there, that are possible to be deployed. So actually, to conclude, what I think is that digital life is just forcing us to have a sort of wider vision concerning the way in which we define markets, the way in which we define rules. Sometimes we always define too many rules before the markets are indeed completed in their evolution. But I think we should take care what is the longer term vision about digital life in terms of the possible scope of digital services that are just in front of us, and we need to find some light rules in order to not raise barriers to entry, especially for new independent investments regarding our digital life. Thank you. Sorry, I had some slides talking about a total different story, but I will send this to you.
Thank you very much, yes, Antonio. And well, I would propose we ask for your contribution. We stop a second. I mean, this is an interactive session, so I'm sure my fellow speakers, my fellow panelists will not really mind if we start asking some questions from, and getting some feedback from you. So what I got from this first two presentations is basically we are talking about the bottom of the lasagna, so the infrastructure, I mean the basic foundation of the lasagna. And basically Arti was saying, look, there are many ways in which user can get this quality of experience. It's important you explore them all. it's important that you use satellite together with wireless. It's important to use fiber and satellite, and because fiber cannot reach everywhere. So blend infrastructure investment in an optimal way to maximize quality of experience, if I got your message right. Antonio was saying, maybe you should not really rush to regulate everything, which is very remarkable being coming from a regulator. And he was, well, saying, look, are we sure that we understand what what users are looking for when it comes to, for instance, demanding neutrality from the net, and how this relates with quality. And then he was commenting about the importance of radio frequency policy in Europe, and I would say not only in Europe, but also on a worldwide scale, because radio frequency is really the basics in which user can get a good experience. So today, I mean, I'm wireless connected to the net. I pay roaming at an impressive price because I'm using my Belgian SIM card. The quality is not that fantastic because it's a crowded room. So we are still, I mean, at the infancy of all this. I mean, and we are talking about, I mean, the center of Europe. I mean, even geographically, Venice is the same. I'll tell you something. If you knew, probably few of you know, when satellite coverage is decided in Europe, it's centered on Venice. So this is exactly more or less the center of Europe when it comes to coverage. Arti.
You know more than I.
So I'm opening the floor. I'm really welcoming comments on the bottom part of the lasagna. Then we go to the upper side of the lasagna with Dorothy and Scott. So, any comment from your side? Any contribution? So basically, yeah, Master Chef is. I don't know how it works. Rapporteurs, do we have a flying mic?
There's a microphone here.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, Andreas. Yeah, because it's web streamed. So otherwise, I mean, people that are following on internet, they cannot.
Andrea Renda from the Center for European Policy Studies, and claiming the role of Master Chef for the reference to the lasagna. Since we are in the bottom part of the lasagna, I wanted to offer a couple of comments on this. Well, the first one is a stupid one, meaning it's the one that gets sticky most of the time when you don't know how to cook, so the bottom part. So I think it's a delicate one that we need to fix anytime soon. And I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all is that we have actually made a lot of efforts over the past few years in trying to understand how to reframe regulation, because the market was moving from what I call a spaghetti model into a lasagna model, meaning into a situation in which different technologies bring you into the same environment, which is the all IP environment. Now, as we try to adapt our regulations for the layered model of the internet, we find out that the internet is actually blurring these boundaries between the layers, with content providers now bypassing most of the network, coming closer to the end users through caching services and other things. So the net is actually becoming non-neutral anymore. So I think this poses more challenges to the regulators in how to manage the whole neutrality issue and the minimum quality of service issue. That's the first thing that I think we have to think about when we craft rules for the telecoms and the electronic communications of tomorrow. The second thing is more like a question to you in terms of, we're starting the semester of presidency. There are a number of items on the agenda, some things that can be pushed a bit forward, others a bit less, depending on how the Italian presidency will interpret its role. One of the things that I've seen increasingly put on the table at political level, academic level, is the potential to pave the way for a future pan-European spectrum auction. Do you see this as something that might be a game changer as we go into a different mix of technologies for the future? I don't know if Arti would be happy about, also including the possibility for some satellite operators to participate in the sort of technology mix in spectrum auctions. Is it something that might be boosting European Union's competitiveness and changing more quickly the life of European citizens in the digital single market for the future? That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any other contribution to this first part? Well, yeah. I think you need to pass the microphone, yes.
Thank you. Nicola Frank, European Broadcasting Union. To stay in this picture of the lasagna, one of the layers of the whole picture is, of course, content and digital services. And we have found that over the last years in the digital agenda, infrastructure and the distribution was in the center of this debate. And unfortunately, we thought not so much the services and the content, which is the interest, of course, of the consumer. Why do they want to access the internet? Why do they want to access satellite, terrestrial platforms? Because they want to have access to content and digital services. So, I mean, this is a question really to everybody. Will there be a little bit of a shift now, or will there be more attention paid to these two elements in the future?
Thank you. Any other contribution from the floor? Maybe we can take these 2 points. I mean, I don't know, Arti, Antonio, do you want to react?
Yeah, I think the point I made right at the beginning is that satellite operators necessarily rely on a global marketplace. You don't build satellites only for one country or for one region typically. So although I represent European satellite operators, in fact, all of my members cover between them the entire globe, and even 4 or 5 members just with their own constellations will cover the globe. If you start making regional policies, be it on spectrum or European licenses, harmonized licenses and so on, for the satellite operator, you start creating holes in footprints, and that puts holes in business models. So while we are totally in favor of bringing down barriers and making digital life easier, we do always want to remind European policymakers, and luckily Roberto really gets satellite technology, so the work is easier there, but that when we are affected by the European policy, we still have to think globally. So whatever you do, we see it in a global context. That's the first point.
Okay. Antonio, maybe this question about is the digital policy balance in Europe between infrastructure and content?
I think that today the major emphasis we had in the past was just mainly based on infrastructure, actually. Because this is our story, this is a story of liberalization, and also because we have, apart from the European Commission actually, but we have also national experiences in which the convergence, also from the regulator point of view, between networks on the one side and content on the other, has not been developed as, for instance, in Italy. In this respect, the Italian authority was an exception. Now, to go back to the question of this is a very important question of the sort of wide auction in Europe. Actually, of course, if we just ask this question not to the regulator, but to members of the government, they would say, well, this is a nice idea, but what about the money? I mean, no. But this is not a problem, because I think the main problem is another one, which is the following. It depends on the quality of the spectrum and actually on the band we are talking about. Because if you're talking about a band which is actually for which the uses are very clear defined and are actually the same all over Europe, then why not? It could be possible in order also to increase the abilities of so many operators to be forced to bargaining each other and to behave as more than just small operators. It would be something positive for Europe. But on the other side, for other bands, and this actually was my idea when I talked about sharing, The idea should be, I think, a little bit different. Is what in economic terms is called splintering, which means to give the abilities also to very small businesses that needs some frequencies of spectrum, say for instance a university, a school, something which is very jeopardized and with a very geographic specific focus on a local area, to have the possibility to have access to spectrum, while that portion of spectrum elsewhere is used by someone else. Because this will allow us to make some sort of experimentation of new businesses and new uses, and to take advantage of different uses also of our devices, which may enhance also our ability to use technologies. Just let me, in conclusion, I found actually my slides at the end. This is just one thing I will, no, it was Scott's fault. He hid it. No, but the question is the following. Talking about infrastructures and content on one side. The other dichotomy is not only between infrastructures and services, is also between demand side and supply side policies. Because in a sense, this dichotomy reflects the one between infrastructures and services. And we should be aware of the fact that there is a strong complementarity between the two, between policies on the demand side and policy on the supply side. But while policy on the supply side mainly could be based on initiatives by private operators, policies on the demand side need a strong intervention by the public body. And I just want to show you two slides in which it has been measured a sort of impact of demand side policies in terms of broadband services for OECD countries. And you could see that in these slides you have different policies on the demand side, and you see that, for instance, having a public demand, having incentives to private demand, incentive to business demand aggregation policies, and also having substitute for consumers. These are all policies that have been adopted at the OECD levels and that have had a strong impact in terms of broadband penetration. And you can also see from these slides, in which we have in the red case the supply side policies, and in the blue one the demand side, that looking at the rate of broadband penetration in OECD countries in the last 30 years, you could see that at the very beginning, it is the supply side which is important, but then it is the demand side. So there is a sort of dynamic complementarity between the two, and I think it is somehow also mirrors at least the complementarity between policies concerning infrastructures and policies concerning contents.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Remains the last question that I leave to Minister Giacomelli, which is about spectrum policy. But I will take him out of the embarrassment about the single auction in Europe by saying that this is not the proposal of the Commission that is being discussed. The proposal of the Commission is to harmonize better rules in Europe, but then each member state will be, of course, sovereign to organize a spectrum auction. Said that, the problem that Minister Giacomelli might have is that the biggest distractor innovator in the digital world is President Renzi. For instance, he said in this very room this morning, that his ambition is to have a digital single market and a single regulator. So, I mean, this is a vision which is very, very, bold and very important. And in your concluding remark, you might want to, I know that you have a difficult role because you will have to forge a compromise in Europe, and everyone really crosses the finger that the Italian presidency, with the help of all the ministers, can get to a compromise. And at the same time, Italy is trying to send a message for the next commission in terms of the future. So you are a little bit in between, I mean, what needs to be done in the short term and what needs to be said in the long term. So it will be very interesting then to hear your concluding remarks on this. Well, with this, I move to the upper side of our layered economy, and this, so the upper side of the lasagnas, which is about the services, the trust, and I'm sure now that our next panelist will help us in this discussion. So to maintain the gender balance, I would ask Dorothy to go first, with your permission, Scott. And tell us what is your view about, well, lasagnas, spaghettis, or the digital economy.
So thank you for inviting me today and to be here. I think it's a fascinating topic, and we all kind of are interested to figure out what is the best approach to create a digital Europe. So, and I'm supposed now to focus on the second layer, which I think is the meat and the tomato mix, if I'm getting it right, how you do a lasagna. So let me kind of, I think, focus on two things. First, if we all agree we need to put the citizen first, then we need to think, but what is the need of the citizen? And I think the need of the citizen and the interest of the citizen is to get as much as possible different offers where he can choose. So citizen's choice, be it as a public service, but be it also as private commercial offerings. And then if you look at, the infrastructure layer, there are some questions how, you get the access kind of or the choice to the customer. But if you look then one layer up, there is also some very interesting, questions to ask and to solve. And if you look at choice, it means on the supplier side, you need to have people who can offer. So that is where the huge opportunity is in Europe. We have a culture of small and medium-sized business. The technology allows today with low entrance costs to offer services across Europe. So it's not anymore that only big companies with huge infrastructure know-how and the power behind are able to access this market. You can today open a startup and you can offer your service across Europe, in theory. So let me kind of, and this is, I think, the objective and the goal should be, we need to get there that a startup today in whatever country can in 3 days open the business, have a good understanding what are the rules to follow, and then just go and offer and figure out and to become successful. So what is missing today? And I'm telling you a very concrete story, which is a story of Microsoft and privacy. Very simple. We have offering cloud services across Europe. And now, you should, go with me on a journey of 3 years. I've been personally driving, which is, what do you do to get your service aligned and compliant with the privacy rules you have in Europe? So what you need to do, you need to go to 27 authorities. You need to figure out from 27 authorities to explain them first what the new service does. The regulation is not fitting at all. So, but constructive conversations, thinking about, hey, how can we apply it? 27 authorities, 27 different rules, 27 different point of views. You want just to offer one service across Europe. So that's the reality we are confronted today. And look, a company like Microsoft can do it because, there is the power and there are many people who kind of can spend thousands and thousands of hours to get there. And that's maybe also one of the answers. Why is it so easy and why are there some companies dominating? Because, this is not feasible for a startup here in Europe. So my, representing this company, my petition is, hey, let's become serious about this. There is the discussion about the privacy regulation, and if you see, and I'm coming from Germany, and if you see kind of the comments which are especially coming from my country, which is to say, yes, let's harmonize, yes, one-stop-shop approach, yes, good, but look, we would like to have separate and different rules for Germany. So back, zero, again, wonderful. So what does this mean? At the end of the day, what you need is a one-stop-shop approach, and maybe this is kind of the alternative model to also from the telecommunications concept. You don't need need to have one central authority, deciding on everything. I'm a fan of subsidiarity. I'm coming from the time of the telecom liberalization when I have been working in Brussels. So why not, keeping these authorities in the countries? It's good. They know they are close to the markets, but give them one set of rules and let them decide. And when you have one, approval, then let's go and offer in Europe. It cannot be so bad. So that is, I think, when we talk about, moving to the digital single market, this is one of the key things where we think we should throw out our, little nitty-gritty ideas that our rules in a specific country are so special, are so wonderful, are so great, that only, the one rule where I'm coming from is the best to fix the problem. Second, trust. People will not use those services if they feel they cannot trust what they get. So, one element which is really important is transparency. I think at the moment we still struggle in really figuring out, when these services are offered, what kind of rules are they following, what are the basics, how can I measure, is it good or bad what I'm getting. So I think a second important layer will be to establish transparency about what rules are applicable, even if it's different rules that people understand what it means. And last but not least, you have to create on security and on privacy. That is my deep conviction. You have to figure out a set of modern rules which set a high level of privacy, which set a high level of security, because anything else will not allow to reap the potential we have there and will not allow to create a vibrant digital economy. And with that, I want to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now we move to Scott Marcus. Scott is a very acute professional observer of the digital world. So I will ask him to give to us his consideration about life in the digital single market. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and thank you very much to all the panelists for quite outstanding remarks. I did put together some slides today, partly because there were some graphs that I wanted you to see, analogous to Professor Nechita. A number of my comments deal very much with these issues of supply versus demand and of content versus infrastructure, so they speak very much to the question that was raised earlier by the EBU representative. This will be exciting. This machine is a little strange. It's completely reformatted my slides. I have no idea what will actually show up on the screen, but hopefully it'll be interesting. So basically, we stand at a point where the European institutions have put a great deal of focus over the last year into achieving more of a single market for electronic communications, primarily through regulatory harmonization. I would argue that this is a somewhat narrow view. I think many of the speakers have argued for broadening our vision, and I think that's really what I'm calling for here as well, for a more holistic view. I'd also like to point out that there are a lot of real problems that we tend not to talk about as much as they need to be talked about. These are problems that are well known. These are problems that are difficult. We've been talking about lasagna, but I'd like to talk about something else which is on the table, which is that elephant that is big and large and inconvenient and that we don't like to talk about. So resisting the urge to be the big cheese in the lasagna, let's work on that elephant today. And how did we get where we are, and how do we get further? Now, the current regulatory framework is a regulatory framework, and it was implemented in 2002, 2003 to deal with a specific set of problems, especially to introduce competition into an industry that was not yet fully liberalized. It does include, as goals, pan-European services, pan-European networks. It contains very few instruments to achieve them other than regulatory harmonization, which in and of itself doesn't seem to be sufficient. Today that liberalization is complete, substantially complete, and the question then is, what are the next set of challenges? What are the ones that we haven't been looking at, and what are the right tools to deal with them? First, it's helpful to distinguish between regulatory instruments and other policy instruments. Policy overall is subject to democratic accountability. Regulation's a little different. The regulator normally operates within a set of rules. The rules are set by the policymaker, but then they're expected to run by themselves, objectively and with a certain stability over time. Regulation has a different function, a different direction, a different goal. It's a different set of tools toward what sometimes are the same ends. Now, single market. Why do we want a single market? Well, we talk about the four freedoms: free movement of goods, services, people, capital. Very well. We want a reduction in transaction costs, we want to achieve European economies of scale, and we want to eliminate fragmentation. At the same time, there are tensions in this vision. We greatly value the cultural diversity that is Europe, and rightly so, and we also have national prerogatives that we're reluctant to let go of. And the question is, how do we balance these different set of needs? Now, this is not an absolutely unique problem in history. I've spent much of my life in the United States. The United States, in the period during and after the Revolution, 1777 to 89 as it turns out, operated under Articles of Confederation. And what did those articles say? Well, each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this confederation expressly delegated. Does this sound a little bit familiar? I think it sounds a little familiar. The United States gave it up as a bad job after 12 years and moved from a confederation to a federal system. And why did they do that? Well, difficulties in implementing a coherent foreign policy, lack of a strong central executive, tensions between central authority and the states. Again, does this sound familiar? What it says is, these are familiar problems. And by the way, to a political scientist, centralization versus decentralization is an absolutely fundamental theme to which there's not a single right answer. It's very much circumstance specific. So we have to bear in mind, where do we want centralization of authority? Where do we not need it? Where is it better to let 1,000 flowers bloom? Now, there's a bunch of challenges going forward. When we look at fixed and wireless broadband, that's where we tend to focus. But I would contend we focus too much on supply and not enough on demand. And I'll come back to that in just a second. Audiovisual content gets far too little attention. We have a DG here that combines the two functions, but the dots aren't fully connected, I would contend. And moreover, we tend to think about the distribution of content. We take the production as something of a given, but there are fundamental challenges there that we need to think about harder. Inefficient use of ICTs on the part of many European businesses, especially SMEs. I was at a conference a few days ago where a Commission spokesman pointed out that 86% of EU SMEs don't even sell on the web. This, I think, is a problem. We have a culture that's not sufficiently conducive to digital entrepreneurship. That's another workshop here. It should be another workshop here. It's important. We have a lot of programs to promote cross-border e-government services. But you don't get there just by sprinkling software pixie dust onto the services. It's hard to get these because the underlying service delivery itself is disparate. As a result, we've got a pile of programs, not one of which I would contend is delivering what it needs to deliver. And we also have research programs that in many cases deliver a lot of linkages, degrees, research projects, but not a lot, I would contend, in the way of marketable products and services. So again, there's a lot of room for improvement. Now, on the supply-demand issue, I had the great honor of doing a project recently as part of an expert group directly for Prime Minister Letta, Mr. Renzi's predecessor. And the question was, can Italy achieve the broadband objectives of the digital agenda? And there are a multitude of problems, but the ones I'm going to talk to today are specifically on the demand side. And there were penetration of fixed broadband that stalled, declining number of fixed lines, limited availability of audiovisual content, high-quality audiovisual content in the Italian language, especially to over-the-top players. I see some nods, thank you. And you also have problems like an aging population and too few personal computers. Now, these to me don't sound like problems that are especially amenable to regulatory solutions, but they are amenable to public policy. So here's your stalled broadband take-up. And why is it stalled? Well, we actually have pretty good Eurostat data on this. It's not a lack of availability of broadband. It's not a cost problem. 2/3 of the people who don't have broadband in Europe today don't have it because nobody in the family thinks that they need it. This is not a supply-side problem, it's a demand-side problem, and it needs demand-side solution. This is Agicom data on the number of fixed lines overall, declining by about 500,000 lines per year. You project it forward, and out of 24.5 million households, by 2020, our digital agenda year, only 18 million households will have fixed network service. That makes it pretty tough to get to 50% of households having 100 megabit service if they don't have a fixed line to the house. This doesn't mean that the copper disappeared. It means that people don't see the need to use it. And here is, of course, my favorite. This is the Cisco VNI data consumption data divided by the number of fixed broadband subscribers. Well, I don't think my light pen will do anything useful with it. On the left is Italy. On the right is the United States. The light blue is audiovisual media. The plum is all other bandwidth consumption. Italy is pretty bad among developed countries, but most of Europe is not that high. Interestingly enough, Japan is lower than the UK. What this says to me is that simply having the high capacity doesn't ensure that it will be used. So basically, you need a much more holistic view of these things. The next slide simply points, this is the speeds. It's OECD and speed test data rolled together. The top represents the percentage of population with low-speed broadband below 4 megabits. The medium blue on the bottom is the number with high-speed effective throughput end-to-end of 10 megabits or greater. Not surprisingly, Japan and Korea are by far the winners. The US is medium good. If you looked solely at this measure, you could never imagine that the UK should rank higher on usage than Japan. But I suspect this is largely a function of BBC iPlayer, just as in the US, the high consumption is almost certainly a function of Netflix. So demand side is important, media is important. On audiovisual content production, I did some work on this a few years ago. It's been a while. It's not that we don't produce enough films. Collectively, Europe produces more than twice as many films as Hollywood. We make less money with them. 2/3 of cinema admissions are for US products, less than a quarter for European-produced products. Well-known problems. Too many of our productions are for single countries, single language groups. We don't have the economies of scale benefits that we need, and both within Europe and outside of Europe. This is, again, an elephant sitting on the table. It's important. And as we just saw, if we don't have the content, people aren't going to be motivated to use the broadband. It will be in the position that's sometimes referred to in the US as hundreds of channels and nothing to watch. So this is something that really needs some much harder thinking than it's getting. Let's talk for just a second about network and information security. I think we have a well-understood problem. Not enough players in Europe that are capable of producing and that have a market for producing these products and services. All of our data is wide open to American intelligence services, obviously. Happens to be a hobby horse of mine. But also private and commercial data are wide open to American suppliers as well. We really need to have intelligent, thoughtful policies that we don't today to reduce dependence on foreign suppliers for network and information security services and products. So taking all of this to an end, I would argue we need a broader vision that's based on a complete palette of public policy instruments, not just on the classic regulatory tools. This is not just about SMP. We need to move beyond regulation. And here I take a somewhat different line than some of the incumbent operators would tend to take. I would argue that we need to look past regulation, not because regulation has failed, but rather because the regulation that we have basically has done what we brought it into existence to do. We have the liberalization of the industry. We have competitors. We need some simplification. We don't need to get rid of it, but we need to look at the next set of problems and use the next set of tools to deal with them. And we need to be much more willing to discuss and tackle the hard problems, not just the easy ones that we think we know how to deal with. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Antonello, with your permission, I would ask whether there are interventions from the floor, and then you can take it from there. My take of the second part of the panel is that we can look at the quality of experience, the user in the single market from many different angles, from what the user is, what the user wants, what kind of experience. Scott has shown us as an example slides about a particular European market. I mean, you can take it as a chicken and egg situation. I mean, if you don't give the highways for people, I mean, to have the possibility to drive their cars, I mean, then you discover that there's a little usage, but it's really chicken and egg. And when you look at other statistics for the southern part of Europe, you discover that in terms of use of social media, the southern part of Europe is absolutely keen to use social media. So I always like to see data with a little bit of trying not to stereotype too much models, but at the same time trying to understand whether you are looking at the source of the problem or the result of a different problem. And that's something that I really like you to comment about. In terms of what Dorothy has said about privacy and privacy rules, I mean, it's very clear what is the position of the European Commission. The European Commission has proposed to harmonize privacy rules and has a concrete proposal on the table. And this is the starting point for a debate about, at least as far as Europe is concerned, the European Commission is concerned, a debate about privacy. Of course, there's an environment in which, I mean, it's not only, I mean, what we do in Europe that influences the security and the way we feel that our data are secure. The other element, of course, are the external factors, and that's another proposal we made, is about network information security. We have put forward a cyber strategy for Europe and a specific directive that is about, I mean, having a more trusted environment, which will allow citizens to know about an incident, and will allow governments to cooperate in terms of preventing and curing the effect of an incident in cybersecurity. So these are the elements that we have for discussions. I mean, in terms of again, the broader picture, another element is about taxation. And what the Commission has done is recently asked a group of experts to issue a report on taxation and digital economy. And the reason why we have done so is that we know that in taxation, of course, we have to be sure that when we make an intervention, this intervention has to be targeted to solve a problem, because and the problem might be broader than simply the digital economy. The problem might be about the system of taxation in Europe. So, I mean, one point is about trying to understand if the problem is related to the digital economy or it is a broader problem. And again, so is this a symptom or is the effect of something that needs to be fixed? So, with this, I really like to open the floor, and I will also invite comments from from friends that are around, particularly thinking about Peter from Digital Europe. I mean, you are president of Digital Europe, represents, I mean, the whole of the digital single market. So what is your take of this first round of comment? I would be very interested to hear. And others, I don't dare to ask the Secretary of State, Mr. Calvo Sotelo, not as a representative of this in this official form, as a representative of the Spanish government, but as an expert and a passionate expert about this sector. So I would really be curious about his personal view. Not, I mean, I know that if he wants to give an official view, of course, is welcome. But as an expert, really, this is a panel about experts, and if he wants to contribute, that would be nice, and any other contribution would be really welcome. So, whoever wants to take the floor, Peter.
Well, thank you for that. I guess I have to say something since you invited me, but that's fine. No, I think it's very interesting things we've heard here today. And of course, from the digital industries, there is so much happening. And what we usually want to say and try to say to everyone is that we need to be very clever about regulation and how we address things, and also policy making, because things are changing and moving so fast. That if we are always looking in the rear view mirror, we are going to miss a lot of things. So we need to be thinking about a dynamic way of doing it to take into account all these changes. And if we look across Europe, I would say that we can learn a lot from what's happening in some countries that are more advanced and have advanced quicker than others, and how things really can change. I think it's important that as technology and devices develop so quickly and people are starting to consume things and use things in so many different ways, that we are open to that. There was a mention here of portability and availability of services and content on different platforms and through different devices, and we think that's crucial that we can achieve that, because people will not understand the fact that they are using a service or have bought something that only works on a specific device, or they cannot use it on something else. Of course, that doesn't mean that we need to enforce, I would say, portability to the extreme, because of course we need to understand that the market needs to operate that in a clever way. I mean, looking at Microsoft here, of course, the fact that we have more or less had a monopoly when it comes to operating system and on the personal computer for 20 years has actually not been an obstacle to a very fast development of computing. So I think that's also important. Then, of course, moving on to how to address things, we talked about spectrum here in a clever way. I think that from Digital Europe, when we look upon that, we kind of stand in the middle, and I think we could be a very positive contribution to finding good solutions here, because we are, as the tech industry, supplying and delivering solutions both to operators and to broadcasters. And we see the incredible development happening also here on how things are consumed in new ways. And the combination of broadcasting and on-demand services are now rapidly developing. I agree that for something, satellite and other high bandwidth ways of distributing are perfect. It will be for some time a challenge to achieve ultra-high definition delivery over narrowband networks, and we need to be open to that. But at the same time, we shouldn't lock ourselves into a position where we decide on spectrum and other things for too long time frames. There needs to be a balance between certitude for those players that are operating businesses so that they can do their investment, but at the same time we need to understand how the habits of people develop over time and have some kind of flexibility. So I think that, looking at spectrum, there's one added dimension to the problem, and that is, of course, that Europe is not at all harmonized in the way we use spectrum. That's the other challenge. Of course, one reason is that we missed to do it from the beginning, and we've been struggling a little bit. But when we look now at, for instance, freeing up lower bandwidth for mobile broadband services across Europe, it's a huge difference between countries like Italy, that has about 120 channels, national channels broadcasted on the terrestrial digital network, and other countries like Poland, which maybe have 4 or 5 and increase it up to 10, and you cannot propose one rule for these two countries to follow. So we need flexibility in what we do here as well. So that's also very important. So a little bit of comments and reflection on these things, yeah. But I think we can definitely, by being open, by having a positive dialogue between the different players, and have a bit of a dynamic thinking in how we regulate and what we regulate, we can achieve a lot. So I'll stop there and see if someone else had a comment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah,
Thank you very much. Inês Nolasco from the European Competitive Telecommunications Association. Scott, you were saying that liberalization was a fait accompli, and that we could move forward to a next type of regulation. My question to you is, so why do the regulators who have a hands-on approach on the ground consistently find significant market power in the need to regulate the operators and to provide access to their networks? So is it the fact that we are going to passing from a copper to an NGA setting, which is changing the rules of the game, or do the access bottlenecks remain? And if not, why do the regulators continue to find SMP in the markets? Thank you.
Thank you. Then we just a second. We have Mr. Carlos Sotelo that likes to intervene.
Thank you. I'm probably not allowed to have a personal view on things, but try to be a... I think, you know, there was a famous Spanish philosopher last century who used to say that Spain was the problem and Europe was the solution. And I think Spain has found a lot of solutions in its integration in Europe, and I'm a firm believer. I mean, that's the way to go. I very much agree with the presentation that we have to make a broader view of the problems. I think we have to take many things into account, and it's just not telecom and it's other things. I think we should drive a new digital package in this next few years that will have, as you say, supply, demand, telecoms, internet providers, all other things. I think that would need an effort of Europe, of the Commission, especially of different commissaries, putting together a coherent package that deals with all these things together. And I think that's so. It's very appropriate that Italy has, you know, started its presidency with this digital gathering here in Venice, and so that, you know, it gives the flavor for the next 6 months. And I also think when dealing with those issues, it's important to have the consumer and the companies, the ability to companies to start up a business in 28 countries in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of work. I'm perfectly, conscious that that's going to take time. But just because that's going to take some time, I think the sooner we start, the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Helga Mieling from the Austrian Ministry of Innovation and Technology. One issue that has not been mentioned is jurisdiction. And I could imagine it would be very important not only for e-commerce, but also for privacy. For example, when registering for this event today, a European conference, I was surprised to learn that the data were being kept and managed by an American company. So this is quite awkward, and maybe the Commission could do something about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. I wish to raise one specific issue, the institutional changes that are needed in order to achieve the European single market. We do agree that there is a need for stronger harmonization, that harmonization is not sufficient. We also do agree that, however, there is a need for some flexibility because countries are different. So it is difficult to find the appropriate balance. Now, the question is, the Commission, with the September package, proposed also some enhanced powers for the Commission, specifically in the area of market analysis and so on. And also, among others, the provision of standardized wholesale access products. Now, these proposals have been not accepted by the Parliament with the April vote, and now we have listened exactly this morning that the Italian government is going to propose a single regulator in the October Council. Now, we have the Commission September proposing strengthening powers for the Commission, the Parliament opposing this approach, and the Council perhaps now proposing another stronger solution. Now, I think that we need to have a very intense debate about not only the harmonization of rules, which is really important. You can harmonize, for instance, by introducing a unique setting of rule in the area of roaming or in the area of spectrum policy. But what is at the end the balance for Europe in terms of having a different institutional setting? Because the one we have today provides too much flexibility, if I can say, and at the end, too much flexibility means lack of harmonization. If we move on the other side, we can have too much harmonization and the lack of flexibility. So we need to find out the right balance, and this is the question for all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Mark Bressers, Netherlands, Ministry of Economics. You talked about production of content. Well, we do make some movie pictures which we lose a lot of money on, but we earn some money, so we're not too petty. My question is, you talked about the bigger perspective. I'm curious your reflection on it. To what extent is more harmonization in the copyright law theme necessary in improving the digital internal market? So my question is on harmonization, and second, what direction would that harmonization take? I've been here now in Venice for a few hours. It's a beautiful city, and I think a lot of the beauty can be explained by copyright infringements from the one architect to the other. So I'm a bit of a favor of copyright infringement, but that's my opinion.
Thank you. So I would propose we take this first batch of comments and questions and we ask our panelists to contribute. So, Dorothy, would you like to take the question on jurisdiction and privacy?
Yeah. So we could spend hours on that topic. So let me try to focus on the most important element. Frankly, what I didn't like is the automatic link you made between American companies in the respect of privacy rules. I think we should not look at the origin of the companies. I think we should look at what are the rules in Europe and the companies offering certain services in Europe, what are the rules they should follow, and how can we take care that those rules are enforced. I think that is kind of how we should look at it. And if you look at the current system, indeed, the authorities do have limitations to enforce the current existing rules. So definitely for the regulation which is now on the table and on the negotiation between Parliament and the Council, it will be really important to clarify that services which are offered in Europe, that they need to follow the rules and that they are enforced, and we as a company can only support it, because if, as you know, data are today have an economic value, and those companies who are not following certain rules today, they might even have a competitive advantage towards those who are applying the rules. And I'm talking there again, especially, in the context of small and medium companies who cannot escape the system, and others who kind of are able to escape today in the system. So that is one kind of comment I wanted to make on privacy. The other, aspect I wanted to make and to kind of need to go in, I think we were all struck by the daily information since 1 year about Snowden and PRISM and what kind of intelligent services are doing. I think what is positive in this debate is that it raised our awareness how important security and privacy in the internet and the digital world is, because if we don't fix this in Europe or around the world, the potential of using the internet cannot be used, because the reaction of the people is not, oh, I go and use a certain provider and then, I have a secure service, because nobody is secure, obviously, in the situation we are in. People will just not use the service. And especially, that is, I think, would be a competitive disadvantage for Europe if we would approach it in a way to stop certain data transfers instead of proactively designing and shaping what are the rules we want to have in this world, and what are the limits, the democratic limits around the globe related to secret services. This is a very difficult conversation. We as a company try to be very proactive, because only, again, if we have a concrete concept and can give the answers to the world, then we will be able to deliver the trust we need to reap the potential. Last remark on it, the topic is today it's not anymore about territoriality, because we are offering, everybody is offering and having global services and offering it around the world. So the solution is not to say, I only want to have a territorial solution. And in addition, if you look at the conversation today, that, countries are starting to say, I want to have rules where I impose that certain data are only flowing in one country or are residing in one country, I think this is a very dangerous thought. It's anti-European, and not only that, it's giving to anti-democratic regions in the world a very good argument to start, segmenting the internet. So I'm very happy to go into the discussion on that, because it's a very serious topic. But again, my big petition is, let's shape the solutions and not kind of approach it by being defensive. This will destroy, I'm as hard as this and as fundamental as this might destroy really the opportunity of the internet we just try to create here.
Thank you, Dorothy. I appreciate your angle. I mean, if I understood your answer to this issue of jurisdiction, you are saying, looking from the perspective of Western democracies not only have in their charter the fundamental rights. So you take whatever European democracy, you take the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, you take the Fifth Amendment of the American Constitution. It doesn't say every citizen shall be free to speak or express his views, and by the way, all governments are free to spy. It doesn't say that. I don't think it says that. And we all laugh if I read it this way. So I think we have a fundamental issue when it comes to rights to be solved in the way we are used to solve this kind of issues, because we have an history of having an history of people that died for fundamental principles, that we are proud of those fundamental principles in the world. So, and also we have a mission in the world to go in countries where we see that democracy is not the rule, and to tell them, look, we want to engage with you as long as you respect the democratic rules. That's why, for instance, the European Commission has this non-disconnect strategy about, protecting, bloggers and people that want to express freely their views in countries where this is not allowed. So, the answer you give is we should not segment the internet. We should not have barriers. We should solve it on the basis of rules and fundamental rights. This is an important point you make, and I really like the panel to comment. I move to quite a different subject altogether, which is access regulation. So there was a question. What about, the claims for a different regulation and the findings of local regulators? How you reconcile this?
Well, in fact, for the question from the person from ECTA, I was not suggesting that we should move away from current regulation at all. I was saying rather that current regulation has been effective in solving that set of problems and therefore should be retained. It's rather that the same regulation that we implemented in 2002 isn't the way that we'll solve, for example, problems with demand for internet services. We need a different set of tools for that. I could see some grounds for simplification. For example, in areas like mobile termination rates, I could see a move from asymmetric to symmetric. There are a number of other areas where symmetric regulation might be simpler and more effective. And I can also see lots of opportunities for increased harmonization, notwithstanding what I said earlier. Spectrum, I think, being a good example. If we can come up with some suitably non-intrusive net neutrality rules, having those standard across the Union would be valuable. So there's a lot of opportunities for this. I was not at all suggesting elimination of regulation, though. That was not at all my point. I was making almost the opposite point. In fact, by the way, we have a good example of that in the United States, where deregulation led to a collapse of competition that had been starting to grow up until 2003. The system collapsed back to duopoly. In many European countries, it would collapse back to something closer to monopoly, which we clearly can't tolerate. If I could actually, on the points about security and surveillance, I happen to have an odd relationship to that. I'm the expert witness against the NSA on cases relating to the excessive surveillance during the Bush years, so this is something I've thought about. One of my colleagues at the Electronic Frontier Foundation pointed out that lawful intercept is very different from surveillance. With lawful intercept, those that are doing the interception are under considerable pressure to demonstrate that they've done it in conformity with rules because they expect the information to eventually show up in front of a judge. With national intelligence kind of surveillance, they don't expect anybody to ever see it unless you have somebody like a Snowden. And therefore, they're under absolutely no constraints. And the challenge that I think this raises as far as gentlemen's agreements is that they would tend to be completely unenforceable. And I don't have an answer for that. I think it's a hard problem.
Thank you. There was a question about the future of the regulatory system in Europe. So, is this future with is the solution to have a better harmonization? This future lies in more power given to the Commission, or more instruments given to the Commission. The future lies in a single European regulator. The future lies in a system in which national regulators are cooperating more together. So I would really pose this question to a professional regulator. Antonio, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, let me first say one thing. One simple thing I've just learned in the past. Regulators should follow the market and not the opposite. This means that actually, if we look, for instance, at the antitrust tradition, we know that the definition of relevant market is something that depends on the specific problem we are analyzing. From an antitrust point of view, which means ex post actual analysis, sometimes also ex ante when we look at mergers. But the idea there is to look at the dynamic of competition in a specific moment in the evolution of the markets. At that point in time, and you have the definition of a market in which the geographical boundaries actually depend under an economic point of view on the elasticity of demand and supply. So the idea of, and of course, regulators and institutions should fit best, ideally, with the dimension of the market. So larger markets may need, for instance, transnational regulators, while local markets may well need local regulators precisely because of the point you raised before, because we have subsidiarity, we have the ICANN idea that local regulation is best suited with local information, because even collecting information is costly. So if you have locally based, geographically relevant markets, then a local regulator is best suited because it may raise transactions cost to monitor, to take decision, to collect information. Now, so what I think that is crucial in this debate is not just the geographical dimension of the market, which in my view is really something that we should be able to observe in a dynamic term, okay, according to the evolution of tastes, technologies, whatever. What is important is the notion of the idea of single regulator relative to the notion of single markets, which at the very core of the European level is a matter of non-discrimination. When we have in our treaty the idea that we have to build a single market everywhere in each sector, we are just focusing and targeting the idea that we have not to discriminate an Italian citizen relative to another citizen, that just moving across Europe should not discriminate our choices as consumers and as citizens. So in my view, when we look at a sort of European regulator, what we have in mind is the idea that we should have someone at the core of European level that takes care about the idea of not being discriminating because of our territorial belonging. And of course, the best, If we will have in the future a single European regulator, this would mean that we have completely overcome our national differences, and that we have a single European regulator that may even tackle local markets, but that we are at the end of a process of harmonization. So I think that it is right to have in the future the idea of having a single regulator is something that would mean, in my view, that we are at the end of an integration processes. But so far, and as long as we have not at the end of the process, we should take care of the national specificity in order to tackle local specificity and solve them to build a market that I don't know if it will be European in all the respects, but will be European in the sense that you have same rules for same citizen.
Thank you, Antonio. Arti, the regulatory picture in the satellite domain is a real mess in Europe. There's no coordinated approach to orbital slots, no coordinated approach to frequencies, but still the two most important satellite operators of the world are European. So does it matter? Does regulation matter?
It's a very good question. It's an interesting question. I think for us, the operators have already benefited from the liberalization that has happened in Europe and the telecoms framework that was introduced by the Commission over the last 10 years. Before that, the situation was a real mess. It was extremely difficult, it was extremely expensive to get licenses for SATCOMs across Europe. But meanwhile, we've come a long way. So at the moment, my members do not believe that there is a need necessarily for any kind of pan-European license. They don't ask for it, they don't think that the market asks for it, and before any kind of pan-European solution is introduced, I think we have to be very clear of what is the problem that the solution is trying to address and not the other way around. When it comes to orbital slots and spectrum, indeed, it's not European, that's simply because for satellite it's done at the ITU. There is an excellent coordination process that happens at global level, not at a European one. So I think we really need to look carefully at any proposals for in this field and make sure that if there are solutions that are proposed and introduced, that they really achieve the goal of reducing barriers rather than adding another layer of cost and burden and so on.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I'm monitoring myself the Twitter session. I wonder if there's something that is worthwhile mentioning. So we have two professional Twitter scanners in the room. Is there something coming up from Twitter? I've seen a comment that it was a good idea to raise the discussion about, to mention the fact that taxation is important in the digital economy. So I said, look, it is important, and it's important to look at it from all perspectives. So corporate tax, retail tax, the way you are compensating among different member states. Are there any comments, on this, or in general? Whilst we wait, another point I want to pick up from the audience is about the balance, the usual issue about balance of power between the Commission, member states. Honestly, I believe, especially in the single market, it's going to be a dynamic balance of power. There are issues which are fundamental issues, which are very clear. There's a subsidiarity principle on certain things. The responsibility is clearly with the member states, and on certain other things, the responsibility, for instance, the Commission is the ultimate guardian of the treaty. So on this, it has a responsibility. So what has been introduced in the electronic communication market, the so-called veto in looking at the decision on individual regulators, is simply a way to utilize the Commission powers, which are there anyhow. I mean, if something is really wrong, the Commission can intervene. If something wrong, I mean in something that really violates the treaty, or so violates European law. The proposal we have made in the telecom single market is basically to move forward the idea of harmonization. And of course, this you can do in different ways. I mean, one possibility, as I was mentioning in my question to Antonio, is to increase the Commission power. Another possibility is to increase the coordination power. And this is probably the discussion that needs to take place. It is already, to a certain extent, taken place in Parliament. Now it has to take place in Council. I don't think there's, I think, listening especially to the session this morning, this problem is well understood, but this problem, of course, needs to be then translated into a practical mean, a possibility of cooperating. Cooperation among regulators is important in every domain, in competition, in privacy, in electronic communication, in content. We are progressing, but of course the way is long, and I mean, it is interesting to progress also by step, because I mean, if you, propose something that, it is too much of a change, then the time to implement it, the time to discuss it will be so long that compared to the way this market progresses, really would be ineffective. So when it comes to things which has been traditionally regulated in a different way, I think the step-by-step policy is the right policy, because then you move, in a direction which is probably the right direction of travel, but you do it gently in a way that the boat does not rock. I use the boat because in a Venice environment, lasagna and boats are nice to be used. Well, I was slowly introducing Minister Giacomelli remarks. But before doing so and leaving him the privilege to close the session, I really would like to ask you again if there are other points you want to make about this discussion before we move to the concluding remark from the Italian presidency. Arti wants. Sorry, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And that was something that actually I thought that Scott might start. Antonio might also have an angle, and I might add.
Well, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on copyright, but I would like to make, I think, a closely related point. And that, again, has to do with why do people in Europe think that they've been blocked on access to the Internet? And here we actually have a quite fascinating result from the Eurobarometer survey. It turns out a substantial fraction of Europeans think that at some point they've been blocked in access to content. I think it was something like 30%. I don't have the number exactly in my head. It's been a while. But out of that number, about 40% of those thought they'd been blocked by their network service provider. About the same thought that they'd probably been blocked by the content provider, and about 20% thought that they'd been blocked due to digital rights issues, copyright. Now, how you fix that, I don't know, but it seems to me that we have an issue that we tend to think of as a net neutrality issue, obviously has a lot of wrinkles on it.
Antonio?
Yes, very briefly, because also Italy is one of the few countries that has adopted regulation on copyright that somehow is based on the same line of the consultation that has been launched at the European level. Now, of course, we cannot start here a debate on copyright because it is a hard issue, and of course, if we analyze the problem just on our ex-ante beliefs, each of us has different preferences on that. So I would suggest a pragmatic approach to that. Just saying that if we just go ahead and just choose not to be conservative in the sense of applying strictly copyright laws, offline copyright laws to the online world as if the product is exactly the same, because it is not, of course. And on the other side, however, we should not look at any attempt to introduce rules and regulation into copyright online as a way to kill freedom of expression, because this is a wrong side of the story. Because after all, copyright could be a valuable instrument precisely to encourage freedom of expression, journalism online, quality of content, raising money, and so on and so forth. So the question, which is, however, a general question regarding the economics of copyright and not only copyright regulations, is whether and where to fix the line between rights and access, between exclusive use and access to competitors. This is something that antitrust, the European Commission, antitrust policies has, for instance, decided according to relevant markets. There is a famous case, which is the McGill case, in which a copyright law violation has been deemed as necessary in order to have access to new emerging markets for a new product. So what I think is that, again, also for copyright, we should approach in a dynamic way, looking at the impact on the copyright, on the evolution of market. It is something that, for which there is not a unique solution, and even the Italian authority has just started applying this regulation, but with the idea of just learning from the experiences and update also our rules in a way that should, at the very end, encourage innovation, freedom of access to information on internet, both from the consumer side and from the producer side.
Thank you. Dorothy.
Yes, as already mentioned, huge topic. Thank you for framing it so nicely. I think this is exactly the topic we need to talk. From my perspective, I definitely see a need of the modernization of the copyright frame, and the most important element for me is on the enforcement side. I think, I have a daughter of 10 years, and, I taught her, copyright is important, you need to respect. And then she said to me, look, Mom, but if I'm surfing in the internet, how do I know that I'm allowed to use it because the owner kind of just told me I can use it? And how do I understand I'm just now copying something I'm not allowed? I think if you look from a citizen perspective, I think this is one of the elements we need to fix, so that, if you are surfing, you know what you can copy, because it's the decision of the owner, kind of, I want to make it for free or for whatever, compensation model, or if there is an owner who says, no, my model is I want to have protected and I want to be asked, to get access. And then you have the third element, what about those who have some content which needs to be made accessible in order to, get innovation going and to get to the citizen, the content, and that somebody cannot abuse it in a negative way.
Thank you. Maybe a small comment also from my side. The European Commission is thinking about proposing a copyright reform. And I think what is important is, as Dorothy was saying, is to distinguish copyright reform from enforcement. I think what would be dangerous in the internal single market is that, member states will start enforcing on rules which are out of date, rules which are of the past, because that would give really a sort of a very strange view to things. So basically trying to enforce rules of 60 years ago in the single market. So I think a copyright reform is urgent in Europe, but has to be tailored to the European economy, digital economy, which is a networked economy, is a network where externality is a resource rather than a threat. This is extremely difficult because you are balancing out the right of the copyright owners and the right of the others to utilize it in a positive way. but I think it's a debate to be tackled at the European level. So I mean, whatever national experiment in terms of enforcement, okay, it's fine, but at the same time should respect individual rights, should respect the idea that this is a very moving target, and especially this is about a digital economy. So, any other comment before we ask Minister Giacomelli to close? Yes, please.
Thanks a lot. Giuseppe Mazziotti, I'm an intellectual property expert and consultant. Last year we did at CEPS in Brussels, at the Center for European Policy Studies, I coordinated a working group on copyright and the idea of digital single market. Okay, the project was very broad. I cannot really summarize here what our conclusion was, but at the same time we noticed that not all problems related to the strong fragmentation of content-related markets in Europe relates to copyright. Because if you consider the music sector, on one hand, where traditionally the rights were exploited at national level because of the intermediation of collecting societies, that's a framework which is completely different in terms of structure of rights from the framework of audiovisual content, the movie sector, for instance, just to mention that. But think also of all those products for which copyright is centralized, and ideally, copyright holders would already be in a position to license their rights on a multinational or ideally pan-European basis. This has not happened. This has never happened. And if you talk to the representatives of the movie industries, of the video game industry, they will tell you that, you know, this kind of, the idea of pan-European exploitation is detrimental to them because they are developing deals and their own creations targeting local audiences, because cultural diversity in this respect, also the diversity of tastes and preferences, prevail over the gains they might have from a pan-European exploitation. So copyright is just one part of the problem. There is a lot of rhetoric about copyright reform. One of the main problems we have is non-enforcement of existing laws. Antonio Nicita, Professor Nicita mentioned the initiative of AGICOM that I personally welcomed as an expert. No, I think on the other hand, it's a defeat, it's a political defeat, because in my personal view, the AGICOM regulation is the result of the misinterpretation by the Italian legislator of the Electronic Commerce Directive, of the way the issue of intermediary liability should have worked. So 10 years after the implementation of the decree with which Italy intended to transpose the Electronic Commerce Directive, Italy rethought, the regulator, actually without a strong legal basis, by the way, rethought of how copyright should have been enforced online. But the main problem, and this was ascertained also by our working group, derived from the fact that there was no uniform interpretation of a rule embodied into the e-commerce directive. So the review that the European Commission is doing about the e-commerce directive, about intermediary liability, is going to be crucial in order to harmonize effectively the rules and also the issue of liability of intermediaries. Because targeting end users, history has shown that, is absolutely ineffective. So the real issue will be whether or not we want to make intermediaries more liable for what they do online. Thanks.
Thank you. I think you raise an important problem, which is about the territoriality of rights. I mean, one of the features of the single market in Europe is that content should be freely available in the single market, so there cannot be no geo-blocking of content, and so that relates also to the point of enforcement. I mean, does it make sense to enforce, for instance, rules about geo-blocking? I mean, for instance, when it comes to sports rights, the European Court of Justice said clearly it is illegal to fragment sports rights. And then what happens if a national regulator enforces illegal geo-blocking? That cannot be done, of course. That would be in contrast with European law. So that's why every reform of copyright should be in parallel with an intelligent way of seeing the enforcement and how the enforcement should evolve. And that's why it's so important that we see this debate leading naturally to a reform of the copyright regime in Europe at the European level. Because probably, and not saying that from my perspective, a response at the European level is the most proportionate response you can give to the issue of copyright in the single market. Any comment on this, Dorothy? That's why.
You want to hear my yes? You know, I think we don't want to have here now a detailed copyright conversation. Indeed, you know, the one angle is how can the system allow the content owners, the copyright owners, to license out in a way that it reflects way more the digital single market. So I think this is the one angle where we really need to make progress. You know, we as a company, we are trying to license rights. It's a nightmare. So to get for, you know, a service offering for the European market, you know, nearly impossible. And the other element is to go back on the enforcement. I really think we need to be, you know, I'm a lawyer from background. You only can enforce a legal and a regulatory system which meets the understanding of the citizen and the population. And the reality is, whilst I'm very much in favor of enforcement, the reality is that the system and the internet has been changing so much that it's very difficult to enforce on the existing system. So if we want to, you know, realize the respect of copyright, we need to have a new system, and we need to do this on a European level. So the answer is yes, with explanations.
Antonio, maybe quickly you want to react on, although this is not a national debate, so I mean, I don't know whether you want to react on the comments.
I totally share your point of view, and indeed what I think that even if we have some attempt like the Italian one, to fix some rules, we should really maybe start to have some light rules, but just a sort of monitoring activities. So just much more to learn from the market and from choices, rather than to introduce new rules, because precisely this is a word that changes so much. Just one thing I want to recall that in a sense may go against having strong rules for copyrights, which is a sort of technological point of view, which is the following. I mean, the main rhetoric we have normally in some part of the literature is that since we have this online world in which everything is really accessible online from everybody and from everywhere, we have an increase, a natural increase of piracy. While we tended to neglect that technology has two sides of the story. So if from one side the digitalization in a sense improves our ability to have access to content, on the other side creates new methods to control access, to fragmentate access, to even introduce technological different ways of access. We can download but not copy, we can copy but not download, we can download but not print, we can copy up to 5 times or 4, which means that technology on the one side also provides answers to the new problem of access that we have. So if we do not have a sort of fine-tuning between the technological choices and options that we have and the legal options and regulatory options that we have on the other, we may even create the risk of overprotection, which of course decrease social welfare and innovation. So I totally share Roberto's view of a sort of a prudential approach that dynamically looks time after time at the optimal way in which can combine dynamically the different options that we have in front and also different targets that we want to reach.
Thank you very much, Antonio. So with this, unless we have forgotten something that you really want to raise, I would propose that we ask the Italian presidency and Antonello, that has been very kind to stay with us in the panel, to give to us his feelings, his views on this very important topic.
Grazie. In questo caso il termine conclusioni di fronte a una presidenza che inizia il suo turno può essere facilmente equivocato. E la ricchezza del dibattito che c'è stata, di cui ringrazio prima di tutto Roberto Viola, che l'ha guidato molto bene, testimonia che abbiamo davanti un grande lavoro. Vorrei ringraziare per i contributi i relatori, ma anche gli interventi che ci sono stati, che hanno concorso a mettere in luce tutti gli aspetti di temi molto difficili. Io vorrei condividere con voi un punto di vista che è anche un po' una valutazione sull'evento di stamani. Il Presidente del Consiglio Renzi ha detto due cose significative dal mio punto di vista e che mi aiutano a impostare la riflessione ora. La prima, ha detto che parlerà al Consiglio di ottobre dei capi di Stato e di Governo della centralità delle politiche digitali. Ha posto questo tema come oggetto di una riflessione politica a tutto tondo, non di settore. Il secondo, ha evocato l'idea di una authority europea. Perché? Al di là della sua capacità di comunicatore, ma perché? Perché in qualche modo noi parliamo di questi aspetti sotto vari profili. Ne possiamo parlare come della possibilità di costruire un grande mercato. Ne possiamo parlare dal punto di vista della necessità di tutelare i consumatori, gli utenti, i cittadini. Ne possiamo parlare dal punto di vista dei broadcaster, degli operatori tradizionali, dei nuovi soggetti che avanzano. Ma c'è un tema che per noi è centrale, questo sarà l'approccio della Presidenza. La necessità di porre al fondamento le politiche e il ruolo delle istituzioni. Se crediamo fino in fondo che la questione del digitale non sia un tema settoriale confinabile in un pezzetto della nostra agenda, ma sia una rivoluzione che cambia dal profondo tutte le questioni che riguardano la nostra vita di relazione, la nostra vita di lavoro, che cambiano nel profondo anche il modo di concepire il rapporto tra i valori. Allora la prima questione è: che ruolo hanno le istituzioni? Perché Renzi ha posto l'idea dell'autorità? Perché non si può parlare della costruzione di un mercato se non si immagina parallelamente, se non si ha il coraggio di esplicitare che a un mercato unico occorrono istituzioni di riferimento. Perché un mercato unico nel quale agiscono istituzioni che hanno compiti solo e prerogative solo settoriali diventa un mercato dell'anarchia, dove nessuno è nella possibilità di dare risposte. Allora, io sono d'accordo con alcune cose che sono state dette. Per esempio, l'invito: non si tratta di discutere e di scegliere tra una tecnologia o l'altra, di elevarla a sistema. Si tratta di varare politiche per l'innovazione come cifra esattamente dell'accordo tra i governi europei. Ma si tratta soprattutto di riuscire in questi 6 mesi a fare dell'Europa un soggetto con una politica condivisa ed una voce, sapendo che questo è necessario ma non sufficiente, che è il presupposto perché l'Europa possa nello scenario internazionale dire la sua parola e giocare il suo ruolo. E io non faccio una contestazione del nome, capisco il senso, ma a me spiace quando in termini digitali si parla solo di mercato e vedo il rischio che l'Europa sia solo un mercato. Noi vogliamo che l'Europa sia un soggetto che determina politiche, perché ne abbiamo bisogno. Faccio solo 2 esempi. No? Recentemente, come è a tutti noto, la Corte di Giustizia europea ha stabilito la deindicizzazione a domanda dell'interessato che non rientri nel caso di un personaggio pubblico che evidentemente non ha questo diritto. Io non ho visto un grande dibattito, eppure è un'affermazione rivoluzionaria in termini di diritto e di ordinamento, perché per la prima volta, parlo naturalmente diciamo dell'ordinamento dei paesi, diciamo dei paesi occidentali, il diritto alla privacy e la sua regolazione con il diritto della comunità alla libera informazione è stato posto nella disponibilità di un singolo, anzi di ogni singolo cittadino e della sua relazione con un soggetto privato. Non esiste nessuna mediazione di authority a nessun livello che stabilisca come questi 2 principi vengono regolati. E non è tema da poco. Se lo decliniamo nella vita di ogni giorno, se pensiamo nelle nostre comunità qual è l'ossessione, giusta ossessione, per la completezza dell'informazione, per la libertà di stampa, per la possibilità di dare ogni informazione ai cittadini. E se pensiamo che esattamente nel soggetto, nel luogo che diventa centrale della nostra vita, la rete, questa iniziativa di regolare questi 2 principi è posta nell'iniziativa di un singolo. Lo dico per dire che qualche volta bisogna cercare le risposte, ma non sono sempre sicuro che le risposte che troviamo risolvano i problemi e non ne creino di nuovi. Così come se la rete è in qualche modo la proiezione di sé, una espansione della dimensione della persona, provocatoriamente potremmo dire che noi paghiamo questa espansione della nostra personalità in termini di privacy. Allora forse prima ed è corretto, è giusto, è necessario, è impossibile creare un ambiente dove questi diritti della persona, la possibilità di espandere la propria opportunità di comunicazione e interazione non sia necessariamente in conflitto o perlomeno parzialmente in contrasto con il diritto alla riservatezza, alla privacy. Allora, lo dico per dire che in questo approccio noi vogliamo partire dall'idea di costruire un soggetto Europa, che certo sia anche un mercato unico, perché è così. Il mio amico Victor Calvo Sotelo dice che non si può permettere di avere un'opinione finché sta in quel ruolo. E io a maggior ragione non posso che dire così, ma lo dico non come lui, non per rinuncia, ma per convinzione. Il nostro compito, il compito della Presidenza non sarà quello di tentare di imporre una visione particolare a tutti gli altri, ma di ricercare la sintesi condivisa, perché la Presidenza può essere solo, questo periodo di Presidenza italiana può essere solo un'opportunità colta da tutti se tutti siamo convinti che sia giunto il tempo che insieme proviamo a dare una risposta. La questione del Digital Single Market per noi è centrale. Noi apprezziamo il lavoro che la vicepresidente Kroes ha fatto. Certo, ci sono elementi sui quali in queste settimane confrontarci e lavorare. Che cos'è la maggiore armonizzazione sui temi dello spettro? Al di là dell'affermazione del principio, come riusciamo a declinarla? E il roaming, questa idea di barriere virtuali nella comunicazione di quella che immaginiamo essere un'unica comunità. Come riusciamo a superarlo nello stesso tempo facendo in modo che gli operatori continuino ad essere protagonisti in investimenti in infrastrutture che sono necessarie, esattamente lo abbiamo appena detto, e come italiano so bene qual è, insomma, quanto è negativo il deficit nella realizzazione delle infrastrutture e come è importante recuperare il ritardo. Così come la vera domanda, come riusciamo a declinare la net neutrality insieme all'idea, al principio di condizioni di parità di concorrenza fra gli operatori indipendentemente dalla piattaforma, e come riusciamo a stabilire il principio, che mi pareva detto in modo talmente efficace, se l'ho ben capito, che non voglio io dirlo peggio, che la rete è una rete unica, che non si può dividere, che non si può segmentare, che non può essere immaginata come a servizio di questioni diverse. C'è una unitarietà che diventa il punto. Io penso che quando noi ne parliamo condividiamo l'approccio, quando poi proviamo a stendere quello che è un testo, allora vengono fuori le specificità di ciascuno, le specificità di ogni esperienza. E il lavoro di questi mesi però sul Digital Single Market, per noi l'obiettivo è portarlo a un punto di conclusione, così come l'altro punto è quello sulla NIS, la sicurezza. La sicurezza, la rete deve essere un ambiente protetto. Noi sappiamo bene, abbiamo contezza di quanto sia, forse qui quanto sia davvero temerario immaginare di poter costruire una sicurezza assoluta, ma sappiamo che se non cooperiamo, se non collaboriamo, la nostra sicurezza sarà certamente molto inferiore. E allora da questo punto di vista io penso che i termini di una collaborazione strategica fra i paesi dell'Europa sia un risultato che è lì a portata di mano, e d'altra parte sappiamo come ormai è importante che tra noi circolino le informazioni, perché non c'è niente ormai che riguarda solo il paese, men che meno in questo settore, dove avviene. Perché un incidente che accade in una sperduta, remota regione di un paese interessa la capitale di un altro e così via, come sappiamo bene. Io penso che qui c'è un passo che dobbiamo fare per unire le forze, per mettere insieme le esperienze, ma partendo da un'affermazione condivisa, la collaborazione strategica per fare di questo ambiente, dell'ambiente della rete, dell'uso, delle potenzialità della rete, un luogo di sicurezza prima di tutto per gli utenti. E poi c'è un punto che è quello di civiltà, dell'accessibilità dei siti, su cui noi abbiamo posto come in qualche modo una delle priorità dell'Italia, che noi vogliamo garantire, che è esattamente una trasfusione dell'idea della parità di diritti fra tutte le persone, indipendentemente dalla loro condizione, della condivisione delle opportunità fra tutti. Tutto questo è solo l'inizio per parlare poi di Internet Governance e della evoluzione di ICANN, e qui sta il punto centrale della questione. Allora, su questo noi possiamo avere un ruolo se riusciamo a fare il primo passo, a dire l'Europa è un soggetto che ha una politica, only one voice, una sola voce, un approccio condiviso, che è capace di fare i passi, ha detto bene Roberto, di misurare esattamente il punto di sintesi possibile, ma di fare i passi nel cammino e di farli come soggetto politico, non solo come mercato, come soggetto politico e istituzionale. E allora lì dovremo discutere con gli Stati Uniti. Io penso che il futuro della governance di Internet sia solo nel dialogo tra Europa e Stati Uniti. La rete è opportunità, è libertà, è espansione dei diritti della persona, è rispetto e tutela del diritto della libertà d'espressione, è un insieme di valori, di culture precise. È evidente che non può essere solo la dimensione commerciale, perché declinare solo la governance in quelle dimensioni non riesce a dare ai governi la possibilità di rispondere rispetto alle prerogative e alle responsabilità che hanno nei confronti dei cittadini. È evidente che non può trasformarsi nella rete dei governi. Forse l'approccio di San Paolo, l'approccio multi-stakeholder, forse è l'approccio su cui potremo costruire, ne dobbiamo parlare insieme. Io penso che uno dei grandi successi sarà se alla fine di questo periodo l'Europa, chi verrà dopo di noi, potrà avere le condizioni per andare a aprire un dialogo con gli Stati Uniti a nome dei governi dell'Europa. Questo è il nostro obiettivo. E certo non aiuta la questione che ho sentito aleggiare, la gestione dei nomi a dominio, alcune situazioni che forse già ora potevano vedere un approccio anche lì più politico, istituzionale che commerciale. Ma noi non dobbiamo, io penso, smarrire la via. Molte delle cose di cui abbiamo discusso stanno qui dentro, come sta la necessità di ridefinire la questione del copyright. È inutile. La rivoluzione del digitale, il cambiamento delle tecnologie impone obbligatoriamente di ridefinire i meccanismi, altrimenti noi inseguiremo tutta la vita e non si può tentare di costringere la realtà dentro le norme che esistono, perché è imprigionare il futuro dentro uno schema. Occorre essere capaci di riaffermare i principi secondo la realtà che cambia e che per fortuna cambia senza rispettare i nostri parametri, che tardano sempre un po' a evolversi di fronte alle cose. A questo vogliamo aggiungere anche qualche elemento di sostegno. Io penso nella programmazione futura europea può starci, ma derogo alla regola che ha imposto Victor e dico una mia personale opinione, di politiche di sostegno alle start-up, politiche comuni più forti, condivise, più orientate a fare anche di questo un punto centrale dell'attività, perché io penso insomma, ogni idea che nasce deve sapere che ha diritto di cittadinanza, che trova casa dentro la dimensione europea, non solo nel sostegno o nell'incoraggiamento, ma anche negli strumenti. Quindi questo è l'approccio con cui noi iniziamo il semestre, nella consapevolezza, se avessimo proseguito ancora il dialogo, piano piano sarebbero venute le distinzioni sui singoli temi, che non sono venute perché abbiamo usato alcuni giri di frase. Il tema è troppo complesso per aprirlo qui, forse questo non è il momento forse questa non è la sede, ma in realtà, pur con l'educazione di un'interlocuzione civile fra persone che si stimano, se fossimo andati avanti nella discussione sarebbe emerso, no? Che ci sono quindi c'è un lavoro da fare e c'è un lavoro che dobbiamo fare insieme. Io vorrei proporre, per concludere, un approccio anche su questo lavoro nella Presidenza, se l'espressione si può usare, se è multi-stakeholder. Una responsabilità condivisa. Non può essere solo un ruolo dei governi, men che meno di un governo, men che meno di una presidenza. È un ruolo dei governi, è un ruolo degli operatori, è un ruolo di chi vive nel mondo dell'informazione, è un ruolo di chi sente questa come la sua dimensione naturale. Allora se componiamo, per questo il grande pregio di questa iniziativa veneziana, non è solo la cornice così bella, quasi da fare invidia a Bruxelles vorrei dire, ma è anche l'idea di mettere insieme le esperienze e i punti di vista, perché io penso che possiamo provare a mantenere questo tratto di queste ore, di queste giornate. Discutiamo insieme apertamente, ognuno riconoscendo all'altro la stessa tensione positiva verso la ricerca di una soluzione. Ma la Presidenza e questo periodo di Presidenza che capita in un momento cruciale non sarà un successo se ci sarà l'attesa del successo di un governo o di un Presidente. Diventerà un grande successo di tutti i governi d'Europa se noi la vivremo come una responsabilità condivisa.
Well, thank you very much. I think you have really in a very, very interesting way synthesized the discussion and also given us what are the perspective of the presidency, which it appears to be a very important presidency for the digital world, and as you say, multi-stakeholder, and not necessarily based in Brussels. So now the job is for our two rapporteurs to make a synthesis, because we can relax half an hour, and I did it on purpose to give the rapporteurs the possibility to work together and present to the plenary the work you have been doing all together. So thanks very much to all of you for participating to this workshop, for contributing, and now I leave the floor to the rapporteurs for their work, and we will be listening to the result of their work in the plenary with a lot of pleasure. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of people. Thank you.